On Saturday, the Trump administration said it would exempt technology products like the iPhone, PCs, and chips from much of the recently imposed Chinese tariffs. But for most businesses in the US, orders from China are being cancelled, and Chinese freight being shipped could be abandoned. Without a wider pause in the trade war with China, the damage will soon be irreversible for US businesses, according to a retail expert, including furniture, toys, apparel, footwear, and sports equipment. Apple's iPhone and other technology hardware, from chips to PCs, received a China tariff reprieve from President Trump on Saturday. But for much of the US economy and small business owners, the damage will soon be irreversible from the 145% tariffs being imposed on Chinese imports. Cancelled freight orders and abandoned freight from China are quickly becoming the norm in the trade war between the US and China, according to supply chain executives, as businesses across US industries put a full stop on container exports, with the tariffs hitting like a ton of bricks. Furniture producers in China have seen a complete halt in orders from US importers, and we're hearing the same across toys, apparel, footwear, and sports equipment, said Alan Murphy, founder and CEO of Sea Intelligence. We had the same across Southeast Asia, but after the 90-day reprieve, those bookings have restarted, said Brian Burke, Chief Commercial Officer for Seco Logistics, while the cancelled bookings for containers out of China continue. Almost everything is on hold as it relates to China business, said Alan Baer, CEO of OL USA. Trump's 145% total tariff on Chinese imports would stop most trade between the US and China. Economist Erica York, Vice President of Federal Tax Policy at the Tax Foundation's Center for Federal Tax Policy, said on Thursday on CNBC's The Exchange. There may still be some things without any substitutes that companies just have to foot the bill, but for the most part, that cuts it off, York said. As it became clear over the last week that China would remain the main target of the Trump administration's tariffs policy, after the 90-day reprieve was granted to all other countries expected to be hit with new tariffs, the message that came through is that lower margin goods cannot sustainably be produced in China. The new exemption for technology can be partially explained by how the supply chain works, but also reinforces where the greatest pain will be felt. Higher margin and more technical goods, such as electronics, machinery, medical equipment, and pharmaceuticals, cannot easily move sourcing, as setting up highly technical manufacturing takes time and considerable capital, Murphy said. Before the tech tariff exemption, he says producers of these goods were analyzing what components could be sourced elsewhere, while primarily looking to draw down US inventories in the short term. There is a concerted effort to move production to Southeast Asia, primarily Vietnam or India, lowering prices to Europe to keep production going, or outright closing down production lines were also being considered. State of freight. Trump tariffs will lead to abandoned freight at ports as cash-strapped businesses reject orders. President Trump's new country-specific tariffs, on top of existing trade levies, will raise the cost of imports for US businesses by an exponential amount. Though in an announcement during the day Wednesday, Trump said some countries, excluding China, would receive a 90-day reprieve. Rick Muscat, president of family-owned shoe retailer Deer Stags, which imports its goods from China and sells in major retailers, says his company is looking at tariffs on current freight orders rising from $60,000 to as high as $1 million. Muscat says he is going to pay, but many cash-strapped business owners can't afford the additional costs and will leave income shipments stranded at ports. Rick Muscat, president of the family-owned shoe retailer Deer Stags, which imports around 2 million shoes a year, with about 98% of their men's and boys' shoes made in China and sold in Macy's, Kohl's, JCPenney, and on Amazon, is among the business owners preparing to take on exponentially increased import duties, but says the financial pain and split of the pain between his firm and retailers will be difficult. His once $50 pair of men's shoes and $35 little boys' shoes have already gone up $80 to $65 respectively after recent trade war moves by the US, with Deer Stag set to pay more than a 104% new tariff on Chinese goods being stacked atop previous tariffs. Prior to the tariff increases in 2025, his company was paying a 6% duty on their shoes. Then the tariffs were raised by 10% 2 times, bringing my tariffs up to 26%. Then last week, Trump put on an additional 34%, and now the 50% levied today. All of these tariffs bring my tariff total to 110% on my non-leather shoes. My leather shoes now have a tariff of 120%. How do you budget that? Muscat said. He estimates that the cost of freight orders subject to the new tariffs will rise from $60,000 to between $600,000 and $1 million. On Wednesday, Trump added another change to the fluid situation, saying some countries other than China would receive a 90-day pause in the implementation of tariffs, but new tariffs on China would rise to 125%. According to one estimate, more than half of the $2 billion in daily import tariffs to be charged by the US are to be on Chinese goods, and the tariffs on those goods will reach over $1 billion per day. For many importers, there are no factories in the United States. Bruce Kamenstein, an angel investor with New York Angels and founder and former CEO of cleaning products company Casabella, knows the challenges of manufacturing in China. Kamenstein was able to navigate the tariffs in the first trade war with China, but he warns startup companies do not have the coffers of big companies to withstand the capital crunch. Products will be left in containers because retailers won't take them, said Kamenstein. Trump tariffs on China will soon bring irreversible damage to many American businesses. China raises US tariffs to 125% as she invites EU to team up against Trump bullying. China has raised its tariffs on US products to 125% in the latest salvo of the trade dispute with Washington, just hours after Xi Jinping said there were no winners in a tariff war. Xi made the comments during a meeting with the Spanish Prime Minister, in which he invited the EU to work with China to resist bullying, part of an apparent campaign to shore up other trading partners. The Chinese Commerce Ministry announced on Friday it was raising the 84% tariffs on all US imports to 125%, again saying that China was ready to fight to the end. The statement also suggested it may be Beijing's last move in the tit-for-tat tariff rises, as, at the current tariff level, there is no market acceptance for US goods exported to China. If the US continues to impose tariffs on Chinese goods exported to the US, China will ignore it, it said, flagging that there were other countermeasures to come.